For 15 years, I was the first one in and the last one out. Back when I started at Fairlane Industries, the company was small enough that the CEO still walked the halls, shaking hands and remembering birthdays. I was hired as a systems coordinator. Nothing flashy, just a cog in a growing machine, but I gave it everything. Nights, weekends, holidays I spent with a laptop on my knees instead of family at the table. I believed if you worked hard, stayed loyal, and didn't cause trouble, you earned security. You earned respect. Somewhere along the way, the company changed. The cozy startup energy got replaced by open-plan grayness. HR grew teeth. Middle managers multiplied. Promotions started going to people with shinier shoes and less experience. Still, I kept my head down and delivered. They gave me a small team and a new title every few years, though the pay bumps were thin and the gratitude thinner. I didn't complain. I watched others get let go. Some loudly, some quietly. People said the industry was shifting. Survival of the fastest, they joked. I just kept working. But I saw the signs long before they thought I did. 3 years ago, we got a new VP of Operations, Garrett Stone. A smooth-talking guy in his 30s, with a razor-fade haircut and a LinkedIn page full of buzzwords like scalability, culture evolution, and performance-centric synergy. I knew right away he didn't see people. He saw assets and liabilities. Garrett and I had a handshake relationship. He smiled like he'd learned it from a seminar. When he said your name, it always felt like he was trying it on for size. I kept my distance, but I watched. 6 months after he arrived, people started disappearing. Not literally, of course, but in waves. A finance lead gone after 10 years, an engineer escorted out after a confidential review. New faces replaced old ones, all from Garrett's previous company. Then he started coming for my department. I want a full audit of your team's weekly output by Friday, Garrett said flatly during a Monday meeting. Sure. Any particular format? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Doesn't matter. Just make sure it's thorough, he replied, already scrolling through his phone. I stayed late that week, ran the numbers, cleaned the data. I even built a dashboard for clarity. I handed it in on time, expecting maybe a nod. Appreciate the effort, Garrett said, barely glancing at the report. But I've decided we're reallocating resources. Some restructuring is coming, he added vaguely. Does that affect my team? I asked carefully. Let's touch base soon, he said, already walking away. That was how he worked, never direct, never personal. Just enough fog to keep people guessing. The next few months, I was excluded from strategy meetings I'd always been part of. My budget requests got delayed or denied. Projects were pulled without explanation. And one day, I noticed something odd. My email access to a shared leadership folder was revoked. I didn't say anything. I just started making copies. Emails, reports, old performance reviews, meeting minutes. I stored everything on a private encrypted drive. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. You don't survive 15 years in a corporate jungle without growing some instincts. Mine were screaming. I stopped volunteering for extra work. I kept conversations friendly, but short. I smiled more than I needed to. And when Garrett began holding performance alignment check-ins with my peers, half of whom were gone within a quarter, I knew my time was coming. But they didn't know what I knew. They thought I was just another lifer, too tired or too loyal to fight back. They didn't realize I'd been studying them, reading between the lines, tracing how decisions were made and where the paper trails stopped. So when the calendar invite arrived, subject line, check-in with HR and ops leadership, I didn't panic. I closed the email, took a sip of cold coffee, and began organizing my files. If they were going to end this chapter, I'd make sure I was the one holding the pen. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, second floor, HR conference room. I wore my usual, plain blue shirt, gray slacks, and a pair of polished black shoes I hadn't needed to replace in years. I wanted to walk in looking exactly like they expected me to. Predictable. Beatable. The halls were quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. No casual greetings, no nods from familiar faces. It was like the building itself had conspired to hold its breath. The HR assistant, a woman named Lisa, stood stiffly by the door. "They're ready for you," Lisa said with a forced smile. "Thanks," I replied calmly. Inside, Garrett sat at the head of the table, flanked by Marianne from HR and a company lawyer whose name I didn't know, but whose type I recognized immediately. Predatory. Bored. Garrett didn't waste time. "Thanks for coming in, James," Garrett said smoothly. "We've been reviewing departmental alignments and your role moving forward," he continued. "I figured," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his chest. "Unfortunately, we've determined that your position is being eliminated as part of the company's strategic realignment," Garrett stated with rehearsed sympathy. "After 15 years, I said quietly, letting the words hang in the air. "It's a business decision, not a reflection of your contributions." Marianne chimed in quickly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You're offering a severance package, I assume?" I said evenly. "Yes, standard package," Garrett confirmed briskly. "Plus continuation of health benefits for 60 days, he added, as if sweetening the pot. The lawyer slid a manila envelope across the table. "Review these documents carefully. You have until the end of the week to sign," the lawyer said mechanically. I didn't touch the envelope. I just sat there, studying Garrett's face. He was good, a polished mask of professionalism, but I saw the flicker of satisfaction behind his eyes. He thought this was finished. "I understand," I said quietly. Garrett gave a slight nod, as if blessing my acceptance. "I appreciate the opportunity," I said, standing up. "Best of luck, James," Garrett said, rising from his chair. I extended my hand. He hesitated a fraction too long before taking it. His palm was damp. "Good." "I think you're going to need that luck more than I will," I said with a small smile. He blinked, but before he could respond, I turned and walked out. Lisa waited outside with a cardboard box already prepared for me. "Sorry about this," Lisa said softly. "It's not your fault," I replied. Security stood by the elevator, pretending not to watch me. I nodded to them, took the box, and made my way to my floor one last time. Packing was fast. A few framed certificates, a desk plant that had somehow survived 5 Christmas breaks, some personal files I didn't need, but refused to leave behind. As I packed, a few co-workers drifted by, offering awkward smiles or silent nods. Nobody said anything real. Nobody dared. I understood. In a place like this, survival meant staying quiet. When the box was full, I took one last look at my desk, my chair, my monitor. The gray walls covered in faded motivational posters. "You gave them 15 years, I whispered to myself, "and they gave you 15 minutes to leave." The elevator ride down was long and silent. Lisa stayed a few steps behind me, not speaking. Security followed at a respectful distance. Outside, the sunlight was brutal, glaring off the glass doors as they slid shut behind me. I stood there for a moment, the box in my hands, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened settle on my shoulders. A part of me wanted to scream, to throw the box into the street, to storm back in and demand answers. But I didn't. I smiled. Because I had known. And I had planned. I set the box down on the passenger seat of my car and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a folder labeled simply Contingency. Inside were hundreds of files, emails, reports, confidential memos, evidence, proof of what had been happening behind closed doors. I had waited. Watched. Prepared. They thought they had ended my story today. They didn't realize it was just the beginning. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Fairlane Industries behind me. For now. The first few days after I left Fairlane, I stayed quiet. It wasn't fear that kept me still. It was strategy. I spent the hours in my small home office, combing through every file, every note, every scrap of evidence I had carefully collected over the past year. I built timelines, matched emails with policy changes, cross-referenced financial statements with hiring records. And the more I dug, the uglier it got. Fairlane hadn't just fired loyal employees to cut costs. They had hidden those layoffs from shareholders, claiming voluntary departures to inflate retention rates. They had funneled contracts to shell companies linked to Garrett's old business partners. They had falsified compliance reports submitted to regulatory agencies. It wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. I knew exposing them wouldn't be easy. They had money, lawyers, connections. I had one thing they underestimated: the truth. I needed allies. The first call I made was to someone I trusted: Sarah Bishop, a former colleague who had left Fairlane 6 months ago under suspicious circumstances. "You finally did it," Sarah said when she picked up. "You left," she said with a laugh. "They helped me along," I replied dryly. "I heard," she said, her tone sobering. "Word travels fast," she added. "I need to meet," I said. "There's something you should see," I continued. "Name the place," she said without hesitation. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Neutral ground. Sarah looked tired but sharper than ever. I slid a flash drive across the table. "Some light reading," I said with a smirk. She plugged it into her laptop, scrolling through folder after folder. Her eyes widened as she read. "You've been busy," she said quietly. "They thought I was just another fool," I said with a shrug. This could ruin them," she whispered. "Good," I said simply. She closed the laptop and leaned in. "I have some things too," she said. "Emails, recordings. They pushed me out because I refused to fake audit numbers," she confessed. "Can you back me up?" I asked. "I'll do more than that," she promised. "Let's burn them down," she said fiercely. I smiled for the first time in days. Step 1. Build the case. Step 2. Find the right people to unleash it. I reached out to Michael Reeves, an investigative journalist I knew from years ago. Back then, he had been a young reporter with fire in his eyes. Now he was a respected name with a reputation for taking down the untouchable. I sent him an encrypted message with a simple note: "I have a story. A real one." He replied in under an hour. "Meet me tomorrow," Michael wrote. "My office." "Bring everything," he instructed. The next day, I sat across from him in a cluttered office lined with old newspapers and half-dead plants. Michael leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Start from the beginning," Michael said. I did. I told him everything. 15 years of loyalty, Garrett's arrival, the silent purges, the manufactured failures, the firing, and what I had found hidden under the corporate rug. When I finished, Michael whistled low. "This is dynamite," Michael said, tapping his pen against his desk. "But it's dangerous," he added. "I know," I said. "Are you ready for what comes after?" he asked seriously. "They tried to erase me," I said, voice steady. "Now it's my turn," I added. Michael grinned. "Let's make some noise," he said. We spent the next week building the story. Every fact double-checked, every source verified. Sarah joined us, providing her own evidence and contacts. Others started coming forward too, people I barely knew, employees from departments I had never worked with. They had been waiting for someone to take the first shot. Garrett must have sensed something was wrong, because rumors started flying through LinkedIn and industry forums. Posts about organizational integrity and ensuring confidentiality appeared, coded warnings to anyone thinking of talking. But it was too late. The tide had already turned. Michael prepped the article, a deep investigative piece backed with documents, testimonies, financial analysis. Ironclad. We decided on the timing carefully. It had to hit just before Fairlane's quarterly investor call. Maximum exposure, minimal chance for them to spin it. 2 nights before the release, I couldn't sleep. Doubts gnawed at me. What if they came after me legally? What if they crushed me financially? I sat in the dark, scrolling again through the folder of evidence. Every email a betrayal, every report a lie. I thought about Garrett's smile the day he fired me, the satisfaction he couldn't quite hide. I thought about all the people who had been tossed aside like garbage, their careers shattered to protect a few bonuses. I thought about the 15 years I could never get back. And the fear disappeared. In its place was clarity. At sunrise, I called Michael. "Run it," I said. "You sure?" Michael asked. "Let's finish this," I replied. The article went live at noon. Within minutes, it exploded across social media. Whistleblower exposes Fairlane Industries' corruption and cover-ups. Employees past and present flooded the comment sections with their own stories, screenshots, anonymous emails, insider leaks. The truth spread like wildfire. Fairlane's official site crashed under the traffic. Their stock dropped 12% by the end of the day. By evening, Garrett issued a shaky video statement denying everything. His eyes darted off camera. His smile was gone. It was just the beginning. Investigations were launched. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. Regulators announced reviews. I stayed in the background, letting Michael and the evidence speak. Fairlane's leadership tried to plug the holes, firing scapegoats, announcing restructuring initiatives. But the foundation was crumbling. Garrett's name became toxic overnight, and I wasn't finished yet. There were still more files to release, more truths to tell. The war was just getting started. The pressure on Fairlane Industries built like a storm cloud ready to burst. Every hour, another leak surfaced. Anonymous letters to the SEC, internal memos posted on whistleblower forums. Employees who had been too afraid to speak suddenly found their courage. The story was bigger than anything I had imagined. The final blow came faster than I expected. 2 weeks after the expose, Fairlane's board of directors announced an emergency town hall meeting for all employees. Garrett was set to speak. Michael called me the night before. "They're going to try damage control," Michael said grimly. "Let them," I replied. "You should see the new evidence that just landed," Michael added. "What is it?" I asked sharply. "Emails between Garrett and the CFO," Michael explained. "They were manipulating quarterly numbers intentionally. It's fraud, no question," he said. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting it sink in. "Send it to me," I said. "It's time they heard it from someone who knows," I continued. The next morning, I sat in a rented car across the street from Fairlane's headquarters. From a distance, the building looked the same. Sleek glass, manicured landscaping, the illusion of stability. Inside, chaos. At 10 sharp, Garrett took the stage in the company auditorium. I wasn't there physically, but thanks to Sarah, I had a live feed. He looked thinner, paler. Gone was the swagger. He clutched the podium with white-knuckled hands. "First, I want to thank you all for your dedication during these difficult times," Garrett said, his voice strained. The crowd sat stiffly, arms crossed, faces blank. "I want to assure everyone that Fairlane remains committed to transparency and integrity," Garrett continued. I watched, stone-faced, as he spun his lies. Then Sarah triggered the second phase of our plan. At precisely 10:15 a.m., the large projection screens behind Garrett flickered. The Fairlane logo disappeared, replaced by a slideshow of damning emails, contracts, audit forgeries. Every dirty secret laid bare. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. Garrett turned to look, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The CFO, seated in the front row, bolted for the exit. Employees started pulling out their phones, recording everything. Garrett tried to regain control. "This is misinformation," Garrett barked. "It's your own words, Garrett," Sarah said loudly from the back of the room. Garrett froze. "You lied to all of us," Sarah accused, her voice steady. "Security, remove her," Garrett ordered, pointing furiously. But no one moved. Security guards exchanged looks and stayed rooted to the spot. "I have more," Sarah said, stepping forward. "Financial records, emails, testimonies. she listed. Whispers surged through the crowd like wildfire. Garrett grabbed the microphone, voice shaking. "This company will not be held hostage by baseless accusations," Garrett shouted. A man stood up near the front. "I was forced to fake audit reports," the man said loudly. "You threatened my job if I didn't," he revealed. Another woman stood up. "You slashed compliance budgets and told us to hide it," she accused. One by one, people rose, voices rising together, drowning Garrett out. I watched from the car, heart hammering in my chest. It was beautiful. Garrett backed away from the podium, face crumpling. In a last desperate move, he pulled out his phone, likely trying to call legal or PR. It didn't matter. The news vans were already pulling up outside. Reporters flooded toward the building, cameras rolling. Fairlane's downfall was no longer contained within corporate walls. It was public. It was unstoppable. Sarah sent me a quick text. "It's done," Sarah wrote. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the building. For 15 years, they thought I was just another name on a spreadsheet. Replaceable. Forgettable. Today, they would remember me. Today, they would remember what happens when loyalty is treated like weakness. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the wreckage in my rearview mirror. Garrett would be forced to resign within 48 hours. The CFO was arrested 2 weeks later. The board issued a groveling apology to shareholders and promised reforms that everyone knew were too little, too late. Fairlane's stock never recovered. In the months that followed, Fairlane Industries became a ghost of its former self. The building that once bustled with energy now stood half empty. Departments collapsed. Layoffs spread like wildfire. The company rebranded twice, desperately trying to scrub its name from the headlines. It didn't work. Garrett disappeared from the public eye after his resignation. No interviews, no statements, just silence. Last I heard, he moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career under a different name. Good luck with that. Sarah got job offers almost immediately. She chose a firm known for its ethics, a place where employees didn't have to look over their shoulders every day. Michael's article was nominated for an award. He called me one night, excitement barely contained in his voice. "You did something big, James," Michael said proudly. "We did it," I corrected him. "You ever think about telling your story publicly?" Michael asked curiously. "I'm not interested in fame," I answered honestly. He chuckled. "Still, you should be proud," Michael said warmly. "I am," I admitted. For the first time in years, I truly was. With the settlement money from the whistleblower protections and the consulting gigs that trickled in, I had enough to breathe. I didn't rush into another full-time job. I wanted to choose carefully this time. No more companies that demanded your soul in exchange for a paycheck. I started working with small businesses, helping them build real, sustainable ethics programs. Nothing flashy. Just honest work with people who remembered that businesses are made of people, not numbers. One afternoon, I found myself back at the old park near my house, the one I used to pass every day without noticing. Now I had time to sit, to watch. A boy chased a soccer ball across the grass. A woman read a book under a tree. Life moved on, simple and unbothered. I pulled out my phone and looked at an email I had received that morning. An invitation to speak at a leadership summit about corporate responsibility. I smiled. Not because I wanted to be a public figure. Not because I needed validation. Because maybe, just maybe, if enough people heard the real story, they would recognize the warning signs before it was too late. Maybe they would choose better. Lead better. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed a simple response. "I'd be honored," I wrote. I sat back on the bench, feeling the sunlight warm my face. 15 years I gave to a place that didn't deserve it. 15 years of thinking loyalty would be enough. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was free. Not because they let me go. Not because they were exposed. But because I finally understood that walking away isn't losing. It's choosing yourself. The phone buzzed again. Another offer. Another opportunity. I smiled, slipped it back into my pocket, and just watched the world move without needing to chase it anymore. They thought firing me would break me. They thought loyalty was weakness. They thought they knew how the story would end. They had no idea. And now they never would. Its reputation never healed. And me? I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to suffer. All I wanted was the truth to be free. And now it was. Thanks for watching.